What's up, my producer friends? I'm David with another MonsterProductions.com. So today I'm going to be doing something completely different from my normal tutorials. I'm actually going to be doing a reaction video. And yes, I realize that I'm stooping to a level low, so low, just like every other YouTuber out there, just making horrible reaction video content. Nah, I'm just kidding, obviously. I think that this video will actually be useful because there is a lot of information out there on the interwebs that is questionable, to say the least. There's a lot of really good information out there when it comes to production, but there's also some information that I think is just flat out wrong. And then there's information that I think is framed in a way where it's kind of questionable especially for beginners who, they don't necessarily understand some of the nuances that come with production. So they may see a video and get confused and think that they should do something a certain way when maybe they shouldn't. And so anyway, I don't want to necessarily go off on a whole charade in the intro. Let's just go ahead and get straight into the video. So the video we're going to be taking a look at today is called Every Mastering Engineer Lies to You About It, Bit Depth FL Studio Tutorial. And this is by FL Studio Tips. Surprisingly, I just found out about this channel not too long ago, maybe a few weeks ago. And I came across this video and watched it and kind of, felt a little bit on the fence about some of the things that he was talking about. But since then, I've actually watched a lot of his other content. The guy who runs the channel, his name is Max, and I really actually like his content a lot. And this channel has a lot of really, really good tips and information if you produce on FL Studio. So if you haven't heard of the channel, definitely recommend checking it out and subscribing. But there are some things about this particular video that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So let's go ahead and get straight into it.
Hey guys, this is Max from FL Studio Tips, and this is one of the biggest mastering misconceptions. This video is to celebrate one of the most anticipating news of this year, and this is launch of our full master.
Alright, so we don't need to watch his ad. You guys can check that out on your own time if you want to.
Saw the title, but I don't want to say that YouTube mastering engineers lie to you about it. Nobody wants to misinform you. I think.
So he's already walked back the title. I mean, I get it. We as YouTube creators, there's a certain level of having to come up with some sort of kind of clickbaity title to get people to click on it. But let's keep going.
It's just the lack of knowledge when it comes to theory behind music production, DAWs, and how computer works nowadays. There are videos hovering around the internet, people telling you leave X amount of headroom before bouncing your mix for mastering. I have no idea where they all got it from, but it's really cringe to hear when you know what's actually up. Not a single person I watched that stated a headroom number, not a single one had a reasonable answer to why you need the headroom. Whatever video you...
Okay, I just noticed this disclaimer. I think that a lot of this is a little bit like tongue-in-cheek, and I didn't realize that probably the first time I was watching this. But he does say, I'm exaggerating now, there are good answers, and I was just about to get into that. So the reason why you need headroom is for the mastering engineer. And for example, back when I used to send my tracks off for mastering, one of the mastering engineers that I worked with, before I started working with him, he sent me like a page with, requirements of how he wanted the track to be prepared for the mastering. And, one of the things was 24-bit wave, and another thing was he wanted everything, like things to be peaking no louder than -3 decibels. And the reason for that is just that if he's going to do any sort of additive processing, like EQ, for example, he needs a little bit of headroom to work with. And then also when it comes to limiting, it's a good idea to have a little bit of headroom to work with there as well. So, the mastering engineer just needs a little bit of headroom to work with. I've actually, I think traditionally most mastering engineers are going to ask for 6 decibels of headroom. So to be peaking at no higher than -6 dBs. But it really doesn't matter. I mean, the number's slightly arbitrary. The main thing is just that you need a little bit of headroom to work with. And potentially, I mean, you can turn that number up or down with gain anyway. But as long as you have a little bit of headroom to work with, that's what's important here. So let's keep watching.
Watch. The reasoning is you need headroom to work with. Work with what? Like work what? Or even better, -6 dB is good, but 0 dB is not good enough. Like what? Okay, so first of all, let's get it straight. When you clip above 0 dB full scale, you will hear unpleasant distortion. In order to not hear it, you need headroom. This is the only reason why you need headroom.
Okay, so he's saying the only reason that you need headroom is to not get unwanted distortion, which, I mean, that's true. That's really the only reason you do it, but that's kind of a big deal, right? Like, you don't want unwanted distortion, especially when you're mixing. I'm going to get into this a little bit more in a second, but like, there are certain instruments which sound good with distortion, but there are other instruments which don't. For example, a piano, you clip a piano and add distortion on it, it's not going to sound good and like 99% of the time. But if you took like a kick sample, and especially if you're producing something like hip hop or EDM, a little bit of saturation or distortion on your kick sample is actually going to make it probably sound better. So, this is a big thing that I see in hip hop a lot is, hip hop producers will oftentimes be clipping a little bit. And that's because, generally speaking, your kick drum is going to be kind of the loudest part of the mix. So your kick drum is going to be clipping a little bit and adding a little bit of distortion. So I get why producers do it. Although I would recommend just using a distortion plugin and then leaving headroom as opposed to clipping it, because you're going to get into some issues, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But let's keep going.
Not hear unpleasant distortion and have a nice studio session. You won't notice the distortion until you go significantly above 0 dB though, but that's a detail. So you ask, Max, how can I get the headroom? There are YouTubers that will tell you should never ever turn your master fader down to fix the issue of not having headroom. They even say it's cardinal sin.
Right here.
Then they say you should mark all your mixer channels and bring them down altogether. Like, dude, tell me one reason why it's different than doing it with a master fader. If you have some effects on your master, then yes. But when mixing, we suppose that you don't have anything on your master.
So I actually kind of like this point, although I will say that I've run into a lot of beginners who don't even realize that they have anything on the master channel. So this is a little bit confusing. He reiterates this several times in the video, which I appreciate that, this is assuming that nothing's on the master channel, but it's still one of those things where, it can be a little confusing for beginners, but let's keep watching.
So hold up, because the purpose of this video wasn't to tell you that you can finally get more headroom by just turning down the master fader. The reason of this video and the truth is you don't need the headroom at all. You can even clip 100 dB, and that's what I do. I mean, not really, but you think I'm crazy? Look, this is my track and I want to export it for mastering. It's not clipping above 0 dB, right? Because that track we were mixing in our full mixing course. And now let's boost the volume here by 6 dB or so. And now a couple of fruity balances to just make sure we really clip. I can even turn it up here. And now let's render our song. We'll choose waveform and just leave it as you would normally do and enable master effects and start. Now we load the render and that's how our mix looks. Perfect sausage. And now if we normalize it, nothing happens. If we decrease the volume and consolidate it, you can see that this is completely unrecoverable. And now let's do exactly the same thing on master here on full, and we render it but in 32-bit float. And now again, this is our previous render and this is our new render. And if we click normalize, look what happens. Perfect unclipped audio with 100% of the peaks preserved.
Pain.
So I get the point of the video. He's trying to explain that because your DAW works in 32-bit float, that you can potentially clip, and then you're never going to lose the signal if you're working in 32-bit float, right? So you can normalize the audio. But okay, so this is the issue with this, right? He's saying that don't worry about headroom and don't worry about mixing, like don't worry about your mix clipping, because you can ultimately get it back later with 32-bit float. But the problem with this is that if you're mixing your track and it's clipping, chances are there's going to be a little bit of saturation or distortion that's added into your mix that you're not really aware of, or it's not intentionally added into the mix, right? Like you're not adding it with like a soft clipper or distortion plugin or something like that. It's just added on top of your mix. And so as a result, not necessarily all the time, but maybe like it's possible that your mix might be a little bit off compared to how you're used to hearing it when it's clipping versus when you normalize it and then you go to master it. Like it's going to, like the sonic quality is going to be different. It's going to be a different sounding mix, which in my opinion is, justifies the fact that you should just leave headroom. You should get into the habit of doing it. Something I talk about doing with my workflow videos and like gain staging videos and stuff. It's just a good idea to get into the habit of turning everything down and just mixing quietly, and then you can turn everything back up later. It's just so much easier to do than dealing with all this stuff. And, you know, like I said, I get the point of the video. There's nothing wrong with exporting it in 32-bit float and doing it this way, other than the point that I just made when it comes to mixing. But, you know, there's nothing wrong with, if you're going to do it the way that I recommend doing it, with, you know, just leaving headroom, there's nothing wrong with just bouncing it down as a 24-bit wave and then mastering it that way with headroom. So the point is, like, it's kind of a cool concept that he's showing, but in my opinion, the whole thing just feels kind of pointless. And especially if you do like me, last week or the week before, I released a video where I was mastering one of my remixes that I've been working on. And if you watch that video, you know that I actually do everything all in one session. And if you have the computing power to handle that, I recommend doing that, because it just saves you time. Like, I'm all about expediting workflow. So if I can build everything all in the same project, you know, mix and master, if there's any tweaks that I have to make in my mix while I'm mastering it, I can do it much quicker than having to bounce it down to a new session, go back into the old session, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the issue. Let's just keep watching.
And we started with this thing. This is the magic of 32-bit. That's why when you're bouncing your mix for mastering, you should always use 32-bit. That's why you can be clipping as much as we did, like 90 dB, I guess. And now this is not the end. Remember this till the end of your life. FL Studio as a program works in this 32-bit mode. That means it's virtually impossible to technically clip your audio inside of DAW, or if you export your song to 32-bit wave. You can hear and see clipping, but the information is there and will be saved. That's also why you can clip individual channels and bring the volume down at the master channel. Trust me, I'm making tutorial content for years and I've seen people saying that you should not clip on any mixer channel. The knobs you use, the music you hear, the waveforms you see, it's all numbers. If you lower your mix here or on the master or after exporting it in 32-bit, computer doesn't care where you take the volume down. It won't add some hidden alien code that will mine Bitcoin on every computer that
It'd be cool though.
plays your song. Again, you don't lose any data. DOS work in 32-bit mode. So disclaimer for everybody that has been saying that you should leave headroom. Most of the time when somebody is telling you to leave headroom and not take the volume down on the master fader, despite possible lack of knowledge, what they probably mean is if you would have any plugin on your master track, it could be receiving too loud signal to handle, causing unrecoverable distortion. But on the plugin level, that has its roots in analog era. That's obvious concept though. Your limiter will affect signal depending on the input level, and turning down the master fader would not fix it. And that's why it's recommended to never have anything on your master, unless you are keeping in mind your levels, of course. That's why when saying everything I said, I suppose your master channel is empty. The takeaway is that the main rule of thumb of every music producer, when it sounds good, it's good, has reinforced its fundamentals today. So basically, don't worry about the headroom before mastering, since you're going to be bouncing the track into 32-bit wave anyway.
If it sounds good, it's good. I definitely agree with that. But if it sounds good and you're clipping, it's probably going to sound different when you're not. So something to keep in mind.
Which will save whole dynamic range of your track, regardless if it's clipping on your meter. Then exporting master track, the story is different though. More about that in the course. Wait, because you might also hear about inter-sample peaks. That's something we talk about deeply in the course, but if somebody's mentioning it in the moment of preparing mix for rendering for mastering, start running 1,000,000 miles per hour in the opposite direction. If you want to learn more about...
Alright, so that's the end of the video. To be honest, I love this guy's tutorials. I think it's hilarious. I guess I'll go ahead and give it a like, just like you should do to this video right now. So anyway, that's just my take. Let me know what you guys think about the whole 32-bit float thing. If you want to leave a comment, let me know. If you did like the video and you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I do videos every weekend and those usually come out on Saturdays. Also, if you're brand new to music production or if you're struggling with anything production related, I do offer one-on-one private lessons, which you can sign up for on my website. So I'll be sure to leave a link in the description of the video if you guys want to check that out, and I will see you guys in the next video.